What's up guys, Jester here, and this is going to be the patch 7.13 notes review as well as the KAYN champion reveal. I haven't looked at either of these yet, so this will be my first look at the patch and the champion reveal. So, patch 7.13, the honor makes a comeback. Alright, that's pretty cool, kind of like the Overwatch thing in the after screen, where you vote for who did well and what roles and whatnot. Honors begin overhaul vote screen. After each game, honor one team will make. Great shot calling, stay cool, sure. If the majority of your team honors you, you should get you get a shout out for the whole lobby. Alright. Everyone starts at honor level 2 and consistent honor roll play unlocks evolving honor levels. Sure, if all team participates, receive a small boost. Okay. Honor level 3, receiving honor in post stream unlocks the loading screen flare. Alright, cool. Probably makes it better for like positivity and casual gamers. Key fragments will drop exclusively through honor. Exclusively. So there's no way to get key fragments unless you're honorable. That's actually kind of cool because it has real world value implications. As long as you're at least level 2, you'll continue to receive the same amount as now. Those dropping on okay, at level 3 receive honor capsules. Those sent don't require a key open, contain 2 key fragments. Okay, sure. Alright, so Galio. Interested to what they'll change about Galio. Galio base armor down. So this hurts from 27 to 24. It'll hurt Galio for the most part, but it's not one of the main reasons you pick Galio, right? You don't pick Galio to win lane most of the time. You're a melee AP champion. Like the strongest class of champions are going to be ranged AD champions because those are the ones that have the best harass rate and the harass is the most damaging. So the fact that you're melee and the fact that you're AP makes your lane phase relatively weak in the first place. Changing the base armor from 27 to 24, that increases punishment. So basically if you're going to lose lanes a little more often, you're going to take a little bit more poke here and there, and you're going to get snowballed on more. I think this is the trade-off for picking a later game Galio pick. Galio just has so much utility with EWR, etc. Global initiation tank rate, ability to do base damage, and all the CC. So I guess they think that Galio is too strong right now, and they have to give the enemy team like the win condition to beat Galio is to snowball on Galio a lot of the time, unless you're a similar champion type to Galio, right? So when you pick Fiora or when you pick Jace, they want to increase the percentage chance that those champions are winning by decreasing the base armor. Looks to be okay. Insofar as Galio isn't necessarily losing hard to those picks right now. Tornado zone damage 45 to 105.45 AP ratio over 1.5 seconds. The 30-70 with a 0.6 AP ratio over 1.5 seconds. So this seems like a hard nerf because you're not building that much AP on Galio in the first place. You're building mostly resistances or health, and the amount of AP you do pick up is relatively small. You probably have like less than 100 AP at the end of the game a lot of the time, so 0.6 of that is 60, 0.4 of that is 45 AP. So really the AP ratios aren't going to come into play. There's no like version of full burst Galio, and nor should there be, right? If you're going a full burst melee AP champion, it should be an assassin, and Galio just doesn't have the tools to be an assassin. You have immobility in your E and W, you're taking damage with your taunt, and then your heroic strike gives you defensive mechanisms. A lot of the time you're just frontline tanking, so the decrease, the AP ratio change isn't the most important thing, but it's the base damage of Q that's getting a change, and Q does do a lot of damage relative to the other tanks in the meta. If you think about the other potential relative tanks, such as Nautilus for example, the base damage is existent, but you definitely like don't kill someone from like 10% HP to 0% HP, or like 15% HP to 0% HP with any Nautilus one spell rotation as you do with Galio Q. Our hero's entrance, Galio channels for 1 to now 1.25 seconds. Hover time before dashing reduced to 0.5 seconds. Hover time before dashing reduced to 0.5. Okay, so they're reducing the amount of time you're in the air but increasing the channel time. So this just makes micro situations where you're using ult to get away. Like it's actually the same amount of time for the hero's entrance, right? It's just you're on the ground more instead of in the air more. So it's effectively a nerf because you're on the map for a little longer instead of in the air for a little longer where you're invulnerable. Micro situations where you could escape before, now you can't. But overall, this doesn't really change anything. So does this change the state of Galio? No, because I mean, it'll have micro implications, but for all intents and purposes, Galio ult operates the same, Galio EW operates the same, so you're increasing the chance that you lose lane by changing the space armor and changing the Q damage. You're decreasing lethal points that the current Galio has by decreasing the amount of Q damage, and changing it, 45 to 35, removing 15 at level 1 and removing 35 damage at level 5 is pretty significant coming in when Galio has some ability to kill people right now. So you're actually turning Galio into more of the full tank style instead of the tank that can kill people style, which I think moves Galio in the right direction, because if you're picking a tank for the team, then you shouldn't be killing people that often, especially not early on in the lane phase. So I like the directional move from Galio. Will Galio be out of meta? No, Galio will still be a very strong pick. Gnar, boomerang throw. I miss Gnar. 5 to 125 to 5 to 165, so Q-Bust and Mega Earrange. Okay, so I talked about Galio before, or I talked about Gnar before to a couple of people. They're like, oh, why isn't Gnar in the meta? Gnar fills two primary roles, right? Gnar fills the 80 range role of being able to harass people in lane, similar to a Kennen or a Jace, while also fulfilling the tank role that Kennen and Jace cannot take on, right? So Gnar dual wields the potential. And some of the responses I garnered was that Gnar doesn't have a clear build path range, right? So when you think about tanks, you need to be able to not be item reliant, low econ, and being able to impact the map with relative tank items, right? But when you think of the ranged AD champions that bully top, like Jace and Kennen, you build some type of AD item to try and snowball the game, right? For Jace, it's Death Stance. For Kennen, it could be, it could be a variety of items. So when you think about Gnar, you think about what Gnar tries to do in range form and what Gnar tries to do in melee form. And when you think of Gnar, Gnar wants to get 3 autos to proc the W. So attack speed implications such as Bork are acceptable. But you also, like, if you go Bork, then you won't be tanky enough at the 1 item power spike, right? So oftentimes you're going something like a Drom's Fist build or something of this nature. So he's not as good as a harasser as Jace is, because obviously if you harass too much you go melee and then you lose harass, and he's not as good of a tank as like Galio in a teamfight situation, right? So Gnar fills the in-between measure of both. An interesting thing about Gnar is Gnar's engage patterns are fairly unique in that the bounce into R combo into CC is pretty cool, with Q being thrown for a slow. The thing that needs to happen for Gnar to be good is either the range of 80 tops get worse, or the range of tank tops get worse, right? So right now, you would never pick Gnar to win lane phase over Jace or Kennen, right? So for Gnar to show up in that position as a top lane abuser, then Jace needs to get worse and Kennen needs to get worse. But if Gnar gets... then Gnar could potentially come in as like the Black Horse third top lane harasser, right? For Gnar to be picked in as a tank positioner in the top lane, the current state of tanks needs to get worse. So pretty much Galio needs to get worse. So there's no other really strong top lane tanks at the moment. So with the state of Galio getting worse, Gnar becomes respectively better because Gnar fills a tank role. But that being said, you would still never pick Gnar. Like, maybe you would pick Gnar into Jace and Kennen with the intent of playing it as a tank engager. But you would never, like, I don't see Kennen and Jace going anywhere, but there's this Kennen change below that'll happen. So we could potentially see some Gnar off of these changes. The base damage increase is nice. The Mega E is relatively interesting with the jump range increase. But I don't think Galio's decreased to a point where Gnar is better than Galio, because Galio has a global and implications pre-6, while Gnar has most of his power post-6 with the ults. That being said, if Galio gets a worse point, or if the other two gets a worse point, then Gnar might be picked up as the second or third pick there. So Kennen comes in. Empowered, attack bonus damage, 0.4 to 0.8 to 0.6 with a flat ratio. Total AD. So if you think about total AD, let's say, I don't know, Kennen picks up W level 1. Say, I don't know, you have 70 or 80 AD. So, I don't know, roughly half of that is like, or 0.4 of that is like 30. But now it's at 15 level 1. So you need to make up 15 with 0.6 bonus attack damage. But you definitely don't have that much bonus attack damage early on, right? The bonus attack damage you might have is like maybe 20 at best. So 0.6 of that is like, I don't know, 13 or something. So I guess 15 plus 13 is almost the same as the 30. But I think it's a little bit less because as you increase in levels, your total AD increases due to base AD, but your bonus AD doesn't actually increase that much because of the Kennen build structure being Bork at the moment, and Bork has a relatively low AD value of 25. At most, you're going to pick up like Frozen Heart or something. You know, the attack speed items don't give any AD, so like early on you're going to be below or relatively equal in terms of W damage, but later on you're like 0.8 of, I don't know, maybe 130 AD or something like that, relative to 35 plus whatever bonus AD. Like, you're going to have way more damage coming out from the previous E than the new E in the mid-late game, which hurts. So this, with 0.3 AP ratio, so there's some AP Kennen implications, but no one really plays it that much. There could be some variations of AP Kennen coming in, but it's relatively going to be the same reason as why you play. Like, you pick Kennen as an abuser role, right? So to abuse to maximum efficiency, you should build AD items early, because range autos hurt more than AP autos, or range AD autos hurt more than AP autos. So this is going to hurt Kennen in the early and in the late. Electrical Surge now stacks when Kennen fires a basic attack instead of on hit. Okay, so that's removed. Runon's Hurricane no longer ranks extra stacks, so Runon's Hurricane decreased value. So yeah, there are like huge Kennen nerfs coming in, and E ratio AP increase. Okay, so obviously this puts Jace at the forefront of the top lane abusers, because when you think about these split pushers, Jace is just going to have a better overall build path, because Death Stance has more AD than the Bork. Jace is going to, with these nerfs, it'll probably put Jace over the top, because Jace already had a decent matchup against Kennen. And with these nerfs, the Runon's Hurricane isn't going to come up as a second item. So if you do want to play Kennen as a top lane abuser, you still have to, like, obviously in an abuser versus abuser matchup, right? Abuser is basically a ranged AD champion, like Lucian as well. So when you put Kennen into those matchups now, they're probably going to lose a high percentage of the time, because your build is worse, because you're not building Death Stance, and Bork is going to lose the Death Stance. And with the implications of the AP ratio here and the AP ratio here, they're obviously putting Kennen towards that playstyle of AP instead of ranged AD abuser. And this also has implications in AD Kennen, of course. Now, if you think about it, this puts AP Kennen, I wouldn't say back on the map, but you think about where can you put AP Kennen, right? Well, you can put AP Kennen as just a ranged champion versus a tank, right? So if you're versus, I don't know, the up-and-coming Gnar, for example, then you could potentially have windows to build AP like in the old days, where you would have the sick like Smeb engages and shit. I don't see it in the mid lane too much, but you could play it as a mid lane ranged abuser against certain picks in the I don't know, like the mid lane Galio, although you don't really want to pick an AP champion into Galio most of the time. You'd rather pick Lucian, because Galio gets increased value from going against AP champions. So maybe like mid Kennen as a counter pick to like Zed, or some other mid melee champions like Talon, for example. Situational picks like that, where maybe you could get by on playing a range versus melee to get an upper hand in the matchup, while also having some AP implications. Maybe top lane against melee champions like Nautilus that get free lanes. In terms of the AD carry role, you don't really want to pick it there because you're almost always versus another AD carry, and you're going to be losing the auto attack trade war because you're AP and he's AD, so you're going to be doing less damage per auto. But maybe against Ziggs in particular. So I think Kennen falls off the map against the top tier picks, but can be situationally picked against certain weaker picks. And this puts like Jace at the forefront of the range AD abusers for sure. Kha'Zix Q 70 to 170, 60 to 160, so we're getting a 10 base damage nerf. Probably justified. Ratio 1.2 to 1.1. Isolation bonus damage 65%. Okay. So you think about the amount of damage that Q does, and let's say Q does, I don't know, let's say at level 3 Q does 70 damage, right? What is 50% of 70? 35, right? What is 65% of 60? 60 times 0.65, right? 39. So when you think of 60 plus 39, it's going to be 99. When you think of 70 plus 35, it's going to be 105. So you're losing some damage and you're losing the ratio. But if you think about it late game, so early game, this is clearly going to be a numeric nerf, right? But let's say you think about late game. 170 times 1.5, which is the 50% additional damage you're getting from isolation. You're going to do 225 with level 5 Q at level 9. Not counting the bonus AD damage, of course. But now you're doing 160 times 1.65, and you're going to be overhauling the damage. So it helps Kha'Zix later on in the game, but it hurts him more in the early game. And Kha'Zix is a champion that wants to get to the later stage of the game, just in the way that Kha'Zix is formatted as a champion, spiking at 6, 11, and 16, getting those powerful spells. So I think this is in line with what Kha'Zix players want to do in the first place, because if Kha'Zix gets the isolation damage increase in the mid and late game, you can use Kha'Zix as a pick champion, and that's how I like to play Kha'Zix. I like to play Kha'Zix Q evolve, E evolve, R evolve, and then go for individual picks. And with this isolation bonus, the ratio is relatively, like, I mean, it matters, but it's like not a lot to, like 15% increased damage instead of 1.1 bonus AD. Like, in terms of competitive, when you pick Kha'Zix, you're not building that much AD anyway. You're going to get, at most, jungle item, Black Cleaver, maybe like, you have some implications of Maw or maybe a Tiamat, for example, but the ratio is not as important as the 15% isolation bonus damage. That being said, in competitive play, you don't really play Kha'Zix as a pick champion, so you're not really getting the isolation bonus damage, which means in competitive play, there seems to be a nerf because the isolation bonus damage is down. The ratio is down and the base damage is down. But in terms of solo queue, if you play him as like a pure assassin like I do, then this base, like, you're going to override the base and AD ratio damage with this, and then you're going to be able to pick people off. So I like it as a solo queue player. Relative to the champions in the meta, Kha'Zix does get picked from time to time in various regions with the W evolve play, but it's still going to be worse than... Like, Kha'Zix isn't a champion that initiates, right? Kha'Zix is a champion that operates like as a pick to contest other junglers, potentially, due to the low Q cooldown. So kind of like how, you know, Olaf has low Q cooldown so he can contest things like Elisa and Lee Sin. But Kha'Zix is probably like a step below or a step even with Olaf there. So losing this early game hurts competitive choices for Kha'Zix and doesn't really help Kha'Zix in the mid or late because you do the W skill. R Void Assault. Invisibility duration 1.25 to 1.5. Okay, so clear buff. Evolved invisibility duration. Upon an entering brush while outside combat becomes visible for 3 seconds. So again, more pick orientation. Evolved invisibility lingers 1.5 seconds after exiting a brush. So yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about, right? Most people in competitive don't R evolve, but most people in solo queue take the QER approach, right? So this is purely a solo queue buff competitive nerf. When you think about how Kha'Zix operates, this is almost exactly going to be a nerf in competitive play, decreasing the percentage pick of Kha'Zix, putting him probably behind the Olaf, behind the new Rek'Sai, behind the standard picks of Lee Sin and Elise and Graves. So, but increases the solo queue environment for Kha'Zix quite a bit. in the mid and late game, and I would be excited about picking Kha'Zix in solo queue if I were an assassin player that skills QER. Kindred, basic attacks and mountain gains Dread, gain 75 range at 4 stacks plus 25 range every 3 stacks. This doesn't solve the problem of Kindred. The problem with Kindred is that your routing becomes extremely obvious, right? If you're going to go for the marks, then you're going to create situations where you're opting your team into unprofitable situations a lot of time, especially if you have a mid lane or a side lane that pushes in, or like a jungler that'll, you know, camp the situation for you to come. And if you don't go for the mark, then the mark doesn't respawn, which means that you're not getting maximum value from Kindred because you're letting a mark sit on the map. So the problem with Kindred is how innately Kindred works, and this doesn't really solve that. Wolf Frenzy to 1% damage, so this is a nice buff, but you have to keep in mind that Kindred is just going to be a worse Graves because of how Graves operates. Graves can just build a health item and have the resistances coming in from True Grit to become an effective HP resistance tank, while Kindred doesn't have that ability for natural tankiness outside of the ultimate. And you're going to do less damage as Kindred compared to Graves, because the thing about Wolf's Frenzy is the enemy has to fight you in that area, right? But if the enemy just concedes that area and then comes back to fight you after Wolf Frenzy ends, then the long duration cooldown and the fact that they can choose not to fight you is what makes Kindred not a great choice compared to Graves, because Graves will just outdamage when Wolf's Frenzy is gone. Mounting Dread, 40 to 120, 60 to 140. Base damage increase is fine, but it's not the solvency we need for Kindred. Kindred becomes a pick after Graves, and the fact that Graves is falling lower in the pick percentages in competitive because the lack of initiation tools that Graves has compared to Lee Sin or Elise or something like that, or the lack of tankiness that Graves does, makes Graves a lesser pick. Not that Graves is a bad pick, but it's just not how the meta is working out, right? The players are just looking to the jungle for initiation more often than they are for control. So it's not the buff that Kindred needs, or change that Kindred needs. Maokai base HP up 25. Okay, our Nature's Grasp range increase, cooldown down. So if we look about Maokai, we kind of saw the emergence of the newer Maokai coming out to be like Leandre's, you know, E-spamming tool in like various cheese rolls, like the support role, for example. But if we look at how Maokai used to operate, Maokai used to be a top lane tank, right? So with the new Maokai, we're looking at top lane initiator with ultimate, but the thing about Nature's Grasp is you kind of use it from various angles, usually around the mid lane in flank positions to cut off escapes and to trap people in flanks. But when you do that, you have to realize that Maokai is put into the top lane role most often, and sometimes the support role. So we have to look at Maokai in the top support and potentially the jungle role, right? When you put Maokai in the jungle role, they're going to straight die off to Lee Sin a lot of the time. You're going to have to concede camps and do all these things, right? Because Maokai isn't a Thunderlord's jungler, it's not someone that you can contest situations with, like Olaf, that's a semi-tank that has damage because of the low Q cooldown. So when you do pick Maokai, you're going to get abused, and when you pick Maokai as a counter, what counter picks in the jungle are you really looking at? None really, right? If they blind pick a jungler in competitive, most of the time the Maokai is going to lose to that jungler anyway. So Maokai doesn't really fulfill the jungle role well, and you look at the top and support role. So when you look at the support role, you look at the fact that you're going to lose to the ranged champions in the support role in the obvious Lulu and Karma and Thresh picks. So when you compare them to the other melee champions that are available, you see Blitzcrank these days, you see some Alistar, and you see Braum primarily, right? So you have to compare what Maokai can do to those champions. Is Maokai equal or below or better than the 3 champions I just named? Well, in terms of an engage, Maokai probably relates best to Alistar, right? Because Alistar has a situation, pre-6 at least, where Alistar needs to get in range to get the combo off, W, Q, E, for 3 sources of CC. W, Q, almost effectively counting as 1 CC. Maokai has a similar problem as Alistar in getting with W range, right? because a smart player won't let Alistar just get into W range, and just like Maokai won't get into free W range, right? So Maokai will do W, Q, and then throw sapling. So when you compare Maokai to Alistar, Alistar has one additional source of CC in his E compared to the Maokai E. So that means Maokai E has to have a higher value than Alistar E, which doesn't really happen in the bot lane because you can play off bush and you can drag saplings that you see very easily by not face checking early on to get cheesed, and by keeping track of Maokai's mana pool. Bot laners can call out, if the Maokai throws a sapling away based on looking at the mana situation to account for the jungler situation. So Maokai is going to be a worse Alistar pre-6 most of the time, and if you build AP on Maokai, then you're putting yourself in a situation where you're like an AP poke champion for the mid game. So we have to evaluate post 6, right? Post 6, which is better, Alistar ult, Maokai ult. Well, they kind of do different things, right? Maokai ult goes for the engage, and Alistar ult goes for the CC break and tank ability. So the real question is, we could see Maokai there compared to the Alistar. Compared to the Braum kind of has a better Alistar situation because you can jump to a minion or jump to your AD carry and then go for the engage shield, and then you also have the ult engage ability, right? So Maokai ult and Braum ult both engage, where Braum ult is a little better, and Braum engage is probably less flash reliant, which makes it better than Maokai in a high percentage of situations because Maokai needs flash W, while Braum typically lands Q and then AD carry can proc passive, or you can jump to AD carry. And in relevance to Blitzcrank has engage potential without flash as well. But ult doesn't have flash, but Blitzcrank is such a wild card. So Maokai is kind of like on par with Alistar, right below the melee champions of Braum and Blitzcrank. Now, for Maokai to be picked, it's almost as if Blitzcrank and Braum have to be picked out, and your team doesn't want to play a ranged support, and you're choosing Maokai over Alistar for the R engage instead of the R tankiness. Now, if that's the case, then you're putting yourself in a situation where, okay, Maokai could be picked, right? But what do you do with Maokai after that? Do you go the support items, or do you go the AP, poke items? And there could actually be some decent variation there because the Maokai E base damage is acceptable for like checking brushes as a support, Baron control, things that Alistar can't naturally do too well, right? So I could see Maokai being picked up as a support alternative to Alistar, but Alistar is like so down there in the picks below the two other champions and the range champions in the first place. When we talk about Maokai in the top lane, you're comparing it to a tank, right? You don't really want to pick it into the abusers such as Jace. Kennen might be out of the picture, maybe the Gnar, maybe giving a little bit of Fiora against Maokai, right? And does Maokai do better or worse than Galio or Gnar? Well, Gnar kind of abuses Maokai, and so where does Maokai stand compared to Galio? Maokai's CC, well, Maokai's wave clear comes with the Q, Galio's wave clear comes with the Q, is kind of a wash there. Maokai's sapling versus Galio's E and W, you have two sources of CC there, but I guess Maokai does have the CC with the Q, so both are relatively flash reliant. Flash W, Maokai Q, flash E or E flash taunt. So those are relatively the same. So you kind of compare Maokai to the Maokai ult engage to the Galio ult engage. And when you look at competitive, the ultimate for the global is almost better because it also operates as a CC if your team can get in to get an effective heroes charge, or what's it called? Heroes entrance. So when you look at competitive, the global implications of that probably puts Galio above Maokai, but if Galio's banned out or picked already, Maokai could come in as the tier 2 tank top laner, or maybe tier 3 behind the Gnar. That being said, you don't want to open pick your top laner. That early on, right? Unless it's an abuser. Because let's say you first pick Maokai in competitive, or like you pick your top laner first in competitive, you're putting yourself in a situation where they can just have a free Fiora lane to outscale in the split push, or they can pick a free Jace lane for abuse. So if you're in a situation where you're going to pick Maokai, that means they have to have already picked their tank, and you just pick this tank as a second, you know, tank pick, right? Because you want a team fight instead of going for the abuser. Because if they pick Galio, maybe you pick Fiora or Jace or whatever, right? But what tank can they pick, right? So are you going to let them pick Galio first, and then you pick Maokai? No, because Galio is better than Maokai, right? Because of the Galio ultimate being better than the Maokai ultimate, because it's a global engage as well. So you have to be in a situation, for Galio to be picked up top lane, you have to be in a situation where you're like, okay, we prioritize this first pick X, we're going to give over the Galio to them, and then we're going to pick the Maokai as the response because we value whatever we first picked more. And that's sort of how I see Maokai coming into the fray in the top lane, behind Galio, and in the support role. Don't pick him in the jungle role. Poppy, Q health ratio up. Poppy kind of fills this weird role where like you lose to all the abusers, and you kind of like fight the tanks, but you're not great at it. It's really the implications of Poppy W in certain matchups that make Poppy a really strong pick as a defensive and an offensive tool. Because the way Poppy could have some really strong choices, because Poppy ultimate can change the state of the fight like insanely and control areas so well in Baron situations and Dragon situations. But the reason why Poppy's not picked, well, obviously for the same reasons you're a melee champion, so you don't first pick your top laner in this situation. And secondly, you have a situation where your E is like an engage, but you don't want to use it towards them because then you're just shoving them away. So Poppy doesn't fulfill the CC roles that Maokai and Galio do in the level 1 to 5. And in terms of how her CC would work, it would be E and ult. And then that doesn't even, like, that's not like as strong a CC combo as Maokai or Galio. You don't have the global of Galio, and you don't have the CC of Maokai. You do have some damage with your Q, but all of the semi-tanks have damage. So I feel like Poppy is definitely below Maokai or Galio in the top lane pick matchup. And you have maybe marginal situations where those two champions are picked, so you do pick a Poppy as a tank when you don't want to pick an abuser for some reason. And maybe Poppy W is really, really good against, you know, Rek'Sai, for example, or against the Galio E that could come in as a counter, as a light counter pick, right? Not a lane counter pick, but as a team fight counter pick. Or like you dive into the Lucian who you stop Eing with your W. Or maybe your Poppy controls area so well, like maybe you have a Poppy one trick that's really, really good and competitive that can make really use of ultimate to control Baron area initiative. So it just seems like it's a situational pick and a comfort pick. And it should be for particular players that are very comfortable on Poppy. And in solo queue, I think it definitely falls behind the other two tanks and the abusers. So Rek'Sai, ooh, we saw E8 in LCK, EW play the Rek'Sai, and that Rek'Sai damage was nasty. So let's look at this. Spells queues while attacking are handled better, okay. Unburrowed speed now takes the same time to unburrow whether you press W or attack a target, cool. Knockback effects for a second target no longer last slightly longer than intended. Okay, so that's a bug fix, so it's effectively a nerf. But it's how it's supposed to be, so it's fine. Ratio increase, bonus AD, so it's a buff. Void Rush can now properly be HUD ping to display its cooldowns. Okay. Void Rush cooldown of mark no longer shows. So this is a buff, right? This is a Rek'Sai buff. And we already see the emergence of Rek'Sai in pretty much every region. Because you have to remember that Rek'Sai is one of the 4 7 spell champions, right? Lee Sin, Elise, Nidalee, and Rek'Sai. Because Lee Sin has 2 Qs, 2 Ws, 2 Es, 1 R, you know, etc. So Rek'Sai does effectively have 7 spells, which puts Rek'Sai on par or above 4 spell champions, right? But the only reason why 4 spell champions can compete with 7 spell champions is due to cooldown, right? Kha'Zix Q low cooldown, Olaf Q low cooldown. Those are really the only reason those champions can compete. So when you look at Rek'Sai, sure, Rek'Sai is almost as strong as Lee Sin pre-6, right? Pretty much effectively as strong as Lee Sin. Elise kind of beats Lee Sin because Elise is a range champion, so she can get autos first. And Italy can get autos first, right? Because of their range advantage. But Rek'Sai is definitely up there with the top 4 7-spell champions. And the fact that Rek'Sai is getting buffed just puts her in like contest for top jungle spot. Mostly because she can contest almost all the other junglers in 1v1 scenarios. Whereas the ult base damage operates for high snowball ability. Now so Rek'Sai might be behind Elise and Italy, right? And you don't see Italy in competitive play too much. But in terms of competitive play, Rek'Sai is pretty much equal damage to Lee Sin, but Lee Sin has more maneuverability, right? More engage potential, more flexibility and movement, whereas Rek'Sai is just more brute power now. So she has a lot of things that she can do to snowball a game, which is why she's picked, and solo kill potential and all this stuff, while being an AD tank bruiser type of champion. I like the new Rek'Sai. I think she's strong, and the fact that there are no nerfs here, it's just very interesting to me, because the AD bruiser items are, you know, decent, right? You have the new GA that could be very efficient on the Rek'Sai, and you have a bunch of AD health items such as Sterix and things like this, Titanic, that are going to be universally strong on Rek'Sai. So I think Rek'Sai is still a strong pick and a good contest for jungle pick. That being said, all the junglers are pretty much even on par, with Elise and Italy being up top. And then almost, I mean, like, Elise and Italy can be contested by Olaf, Kha'Zix, and then those are also equal on par to the Lee Sin and the Rek'Sai, with Ivan falling behind. So I think Rek'Sai's in a good state. But she's only in the good state because the jungle matchups are so equal right now. And the state of the jungle matchups are so equal. So Shaco, if you saw my video before, Shaco, I talked about this before. The E-base damage is increasing from 5,125 to 5,150, so that's a clear buff. Ratio 0.75 total AD to 0.6 to 1.2 bonus AD. So obviously total AD changing to bonus AD is going to hurt in the early game numerically, because it's down but up at level 5, so post level 9 usually. And total AD instead of bonus AD makes it more beneficial for Shaco to be building Glass Cannon AD compared to the Bruiser AD styles with low AD values, which just like Tiamat and Triforce were like 20 plus 25 AD. So in terms of how that operates, it's going to be early game nerf, but they're compensating with the base AD damage increase. Mathematically, it's relatively equal or a little bit less. The most interesting part is this. Well, the damage type is magic to physical, which doesn't change too much because you didn't really itemize MR against Shaco in the first place. You typically itemized armor anyway, so if anything, this will hurt him a little bit, but it's not that much. But when you think about the amount of physical damage dealers in the game right now, Jace top, Lucian mid, Draven bottom, you know, AD junglers like Kha'Zix, Lee Sin, Graves. Overall, people are building more armor than they are MR these days because AD champions are stronger than AP champions, so it puts Shaco in a case to be a nerf with the magic type damage change. This is most interesting. Now deals up to 50% additional damage based on target's missing health from the 3 to 8% from before. So we ran the numbers for this. So basically, for every 2% of HP the enemy is missing, you're going to do 1% more damage. So for example, if they're at 98% HP, your E is going to do 1% more damage. If they're at 50% HP, your E is going to do 25% more damage. And the number crunch is such that for level 3 E early on, you kind of want to shiv them when they're at 40% HP or below to break even, and like post level, like at level 4, where your E is level 2, you're gonna want to shiv them at like 60% HP is a break even, and then you almost never have to worry about it after that. So it's a buff, but the magic damage change is the most interesting change, because this will put a damper on the situation. And not like people were building exclusively armor just for Shaco, but with the state of Lucian mids, etc., you're just having more people build armor in the first place. In terms of competitive, Shaco kind of operates like a Rek'Sai almost, because Rek'Sai has minimal CC now in the current state that she's in, and with additional base damage, Rek'Sai does do damage, but Shaco probably has more maneuverability than Rek'Sai due to the Q 4.5 second Q. But the problem with that is Shaco can't compete with the other junglers named, you know, Graves, Elise, Nidalee, Elise, Rek'Sai, Olaf, Kha'Zix. Shaco can't 1v1 them in a vacuum, so that's why Shaco falls below these 7 or 8 jungle picks, which is why he shouldn't be picked up in competitive. He doesn't have a low enough cooldown rotation to be able to contest like Olaf, and he doesn't have like a 7 spell kit like Lee Sin to be able, or Rek'Sai, to compare to the situation. So you should not pick Shaco in competitive. In terms of solo queue, this is a general buff, but again, you shouldn't, like if you wanted to pick up Shaco, you wouldn't pick him up in solo queue to like win the early game against other junglers. You would have to outmaneuver, and you would have to be like really good to outmaneuver other junglers in the early game, or play for the mid or late game, which is really not what Shaco likes to do. Trundle. Trundle can once again chomp turrets, okay. Timing following chomp now is more consistent, okay. W, healing and regen 25%. Bug fix was already giving 25%. Oh, 5 steal, okay. So basically it's a W buff, but we have to look at the state of Trundle, right? So Trundle is a counter pick, right? In terms of abusers, not as good as Jace. Not as good as Fiora, right? Trundle gets outscaled by Fiora. Plus, there's low value to picking Trundle into Fiora because you want to make use of the Trundle ultimate, right? Because you want to steal stats. So Trundle's a pick into the tanks. Now, in the current structure of the tanks, you want to pick Galio, Nautilus, Gnar, Maokai, maybe, right? These are the picks that we talked about for top lane. So when you talk about these picks for top lane, sure, you can pick Trundle as a light counter. Maybe you can win lane against them. Have a strong split push and ultimate, right? So, but the real question is, would you want? So, it's not a blind pick, right? You can't blind pick Trundle because then they'll just pick Jace or Fiora and you'll lose. So you kind of pick it as a counter to those tanks. Now, one, that's team reliant. That basically means your team is comfortable playing split, which is fine, right? There's nothing wrong with playing split. There's nothing wrong with playing 1-3-1 or 4-1 compared to Galio sidewave managed control insta team fight, right? There's nothing wrong with that. The question is, do you want to pick Trundle instead of Fiora, Jace, or Kennen, Gnar? And that seems like a preferential pick, right? Because you can pick it as a team fight join tool, which basically means that if Galio comes to fight, you can also come to fight. You can ult the Galio and get value from your ultimate to effectively like operate as a tank with semi-CC with W speed increase and then E. You don't have as good CC as Galio. You shred the Galio resistance, and then you can do more damage than Galio in the fight. So the implication is that you can beat Galio like that in the lane phase and in the team fight, but then Galio still has an axis win with the amount of CC that he has compared to the amount of CC that Trundle has. It's really a pick that almost falls into the category of worse than Fiora, better than Poppy, better than Galio, almost, depending on how your laner is comfortable playing it. I can definitely see it picked because the low cooldown timing of Q has a lot of split implications and whatnot. So I can definitely see Galio being picked up in the top lane role. In terms of Galio in other roles, mainly the support and jungle role, when we look at Galio support, Or when we look at Galio jungle first, Galio can almost contest other junglers because of the low cooldown of Chomp almost being mirroring the power of Olaf, low cooldown of Q. So I could feasibly see Trundle coming into the jungle pick role. It's not beyond the situation, right? The problem with it is that how does Trundle operate compared to other junglers in the mid and late game? And there's some uniqueness factor of being able to ultimate someone as Trundle in the jungle role. So we could actually see jungle Trundle come out if like a lot of the junglers are banned out, and maybe there's like a high percentage of tanks on the enemy team to give, or at least like one really strong tank to give Trundle some value. Because think about if you pick him in the jungle, right? Your top laner, let's say their top laner is Galio, right? You're not going to be the one matching their top laner because you don't have the TP, right? If both top laners are bottom, then you're with the team, right? So you're in a 1-3-1 or a 4-1 situation generally. Now when you're there, you don't really have a Galio's ultimate, right? Because the Galio's in the side lane contesting the situation. Like if you guys team fight, that's a different story, but you want to account for the situation where it's like 4v4 or 3v3. So when you do that, typically it's the solo lanes in the your mid and top lane in the side lanes, and then the jungler, the AD carry, and the support in the third lane, right? So you're typically against the jungle, AD, and support. Now, does Trundle have ultimate value there? Not really against the AD carry, right? So there are some picks though where you get value if they pick a tanky support or if they pick a tanky jungler, right? So I can see Trundle as a light counter against the... And remember, you steal resistance. So you don't really want to pick it into some of the supports because champions like Braum get by with inbuilt resistance and stats with W and E, Unbreakable, Alistar Ultimate. Doesn't actually give you numerics, it just gives you damage reduction. And then the last one of them, Blitzcrank. Semi-tanky, but the build of supports often are such a way that it's Sightstone, then, you know, maybe Face, maybe Redemption. And if they do go Redemption, you're not stealing stat values, right? It's just health. So Trundle could come in as a counter pick. So when you think about the 3 setup, the AD, the jungle, and the support, you're in a situation where, okay, you don't want to ultimate the AD, you don't really want to ultimate the support, so that means you have to ultimate the other jungler, right? So that means the other jungler has to be tankier, which means that your ultimate has to have some value to be in the 3 setup, right? So that's where you want to pick up Trundle in the jungle. And which junglers do you want to pick that up against? Maybe Lee Sin, but most likely it should be Olaf. The new Rek'Sai doesn't really build that much resistances, so mostly against Lee Sin and Olaf, right? But more so Olaf than Lee Sin, because Lee Sin's will build Warrior into Black Cleaver, and that's just health non-resist, while Olaf will build Cinderhulk into some resist item a lot of the time. So if Trundle is played in the jungle, it'll be a counter pick, a light counter to the Olaf jungle pick. And the Olaf jungle pick comes out mostly here in North America compared to LCK and LPL and EU LCS. In terms of the support role, it's hard to say exactly because you don't really value the ultimate in the 2v2 like I just talked about. You don't really want to use it against the enemy AD and the enemy support. So I kind of see Trundle coming out as a top lane pick and as a jungle pick as described. Very interesting to see the state of Trundle and see how it develops. I like Trundle. It's a fun champion. But situational pick as I described, counter pick. Side attack speed, now lock-in F skills with attack speed. Xayah is still in a state where she's building Essence Reaver, but if she builds Bork, then that's okay, but you're going to lose the Death Stance builders, like the Draven, for example. And, you know, the Death Stance Lucian bot lanes are going to beat the Xayahs. That's probably one of the main reasons why you don't see Xayah, because you want to have Rakan synergy. Forgot to mention Rakan, but that doesn't really impact anything that I've said today. But, like, you're in a spot where your builds are just worse than other builds. The Bork build is going to be worse than the Death Stance build or the IE build coming out from Caitlyn. And the Essence Reaver build is going to be worse because you're not getting full value of the Essence Reaver until your second item, so you're kind of conceding the situation, which is why Xayah hasn't picked that well. Rammus, I mean, can't be picked in the jungle because you'll lose to every other jungler. You don't really want to pick in the support role because you don't build that much armor in the support role based on the item build paths. And Rammus in the top lane, I guess you could pick Rammus instead of Galio, Maokai, Gnar. You'll get wrecked by Gnar. Rammus compared to Galio. Like, your ultimate doesn't really do shit. It's a damage spell for a tank, which is really, really weird. So you don't have CC. Like, your CC comes from your Q and your E, but that's almost equivalent to the Galio or the Maokai mechanics where your ultimate doesn't really do anything for a tank, as a tank. So Rammus is probably a worse top laner than the already described tops. Audio updates, sure. Abyssal Mask. Spectre's Cowl, Negatron Cloak, 880 to Catalyst. And Negatron Cloak, 1080. So they're changing it off Spectre's Cowl. So the fact that you're building Catalyst is a situation that's going to be a nerf, because when you think about the people that build Abyssal Mask, you typically want... Well, first of all, Catalyst is a weaker item because it doesn't give you the immediate value. It means you have to play slow as compared to the Spectre's Cowl, where sure you get that regeneration from time to time, but like you don't have to wait for the value of the item to come in. Additionally, the fact that the gold increase goes up by 100 from 28 to 29, so that's going to be a nerf. So this build path looks overall like a nerf. Removed health regen, no longer gives us 100 base health regen, so that's really bad, because even if you're increasing the health 50, like, what's your base health regen, right? Like, let's say your base health regen is like 5 or 10 per 5, right? That means you're getting 5 HP for 5 seconds. So how long does it take you to get 50 HP if you're like not full health? 5 per 5 times 10, so 50 seconds, right? So over the course of 50 seconds, you're already going to break even with this, and then this will have more value than this. So this is a clear nerf insofar as you're taking any amount of damage. 300 mana. Mana management is pretty clear these days. You don't really need mana, especially on champions that are going to build Abyssal Mask. Health and magic damage. If you do build this item, you're typically building this as a mid lane jungler or top laner. And you don't really want to build it too early as a jungler unless you're being like Olaf and you want to build its second item. You're up against 2 AP or something, or you're up against 2 AP and you have like AP, mid AP, top, for example. And top tank and mid tank, or mid Cassio or whatever, right? In the top lane, you could build this in the matchups where you're up against an AP champion, like maybe AP Kennen comes up, or like any of the tank matchups, Galio versus Maokai, for example. And then you have mid AP damage, but overall, these are nerfs to the items, and you don't really care about the mana management. Magic damage, magic resist down, so all of these are fucking nerfs, except for this, but who gives a damn about this? 15% of damage taken from champions is gained as mana. What? Spending mana restores 20% of the cost as health, up to 25 per spellcast. Okay, that is very interesting. And I'm assuming you still have the previous 10% additional magic damage. Okay, so let's take a step back first, and let's look at the potential champions that can build this, right? Does Olaf get value from this? 15% of damage taken from champions is gained as mana. Not really, right? Like, you don't really care about the mana. But spending mana restores 20% of the cost as health, up to 25 per spellcast. Now, if you think about that implication, sure, Olaf could build it. You're okay with spamming now, and you gain health back, which is nice for Olaf because that's his main source of damage as well, with the E and whatnot. So sure, you have some implication value of getting it on junglers. Most primarily Olaf in AP versus AP team composition. when you think about how top laners could build it, primarily in the Maokai versus Nautilus versus Galio matchup, alright, it seems okay. You know, the numeric nerfs of this, they exist, but you don't really need to build adaptive helm, for example, unless like they have extremely specific AP damage like Cassio. So you could opt into this as your magic resist item now, instead of, let's say, Spear Visage. So we have to compare Abyssal Mask as a situational pick when both teams have AP damage compared to Spear Visage. And let's look at the regeneration. Who maximizes regeneration the most? It's probably going to be Maokai out of the three, right? Obviously, you have base regeneration from Spirit Visage, but you could definitely make an argument for Abyssal Mask over Spirit Visage in the top lane. The build path, it's acceptable, the 100 gold, but it's really a question of the unique passive value. You don't really gain too much from getting mana back like this, outside of the fact that maybe you can shove waves in the top lane, but D-Ring singular, I guess with the 1 D-Ring nerf, now that it's a unique passive, top laners might be opting into situations where they're mana stricken, because let's say one top laner uses their mana more, that means one has to base, that means they're going to lose a wave, and they're going to get movement. The other champion is going to get movement priority. Whoever gets more mana is going to shove first and get the first rotation down, while as the other champion has to concede a wave or base go back top, and then the enemy champions already have rotated mid or bot for the jungle dragon fight. So I guess there's some implications for this mana with the Catalyst, because I guess if you're not going to go for kills in the top lane anyway, if there are 2 tanks in the top lane, I guess you can be greedy and get away with Catalyst. And up to 25 per spell cast is the interesting thing. The first thing I thought of when I saw this was, okay, Cassio maybe, right? Alternative to tier build. You gain mana, and that mana will give you health, so you're solving back scenarios for health, mana, and magic resist, so you have health and magic resist against the opposing AP champion, and you're solving back health and mana as an issue. Plus 25 per spellcast, so Cassio manages a lot of spellcasts, just like Cassio uses way more spellcast than we don't know if there's an internal cooldown, but like compared to Galio or Maokai or Nautilus, those don't even use that many spellcasts, right? It's just like 1 or 2 per wave. So it might be extremely Cassio favored or mid lane favored, honestly. Like, can you think about this as a mid lane first pickup item? You remember when Negatron Cloak was super strong because you would build Abyssal? But if you built Abyssal, you didn't have health, so you only had magic resist. This is an item that gives health and MR, so you can never die. Answers back the health component, answers back the magic resist component. Actually, looking at this item seems to like just put Cassio at the forefront of the mid lane situation to be extremely broken. Now, obviously, the answer says, well, you don't get this unique passive until you finish the item, right? So you're still going to have to build tier. Alright, fine. We'll go with that. But tier into Abyssal Mask for the mid lane Cassio in a situation, like, they can almost never pick a top lane. Like, Cassio might just be first pick, first ban, honestly. Or like a lot of mid laners. Maybe even Talia could be a first pick, first ban situation. Champions that trade a lot or get in the enemy champion's face are more likely to pick this, because if you're at full HP in the... Like, if Cassio fronts the wave and you trade HP, this will benefit the Cassio, right? But no champions really get up front and do that a lot, right? Talia doesn't just walk up in front of the wave and trade. Cinder doesn't really just walk up in front of the wave and trade with them. They kind of space it, so they don't get the maximum value from the 25% HP per cast. But Cassio is one of the only champions that literally just walks up and straight trades with people. I don't think there are any other mid lanes that just come up and straight trade with people. To go up and take additional damage from champions in the first place. I think this just puts Cassio as first pick, where she goes D-ring for the unique passive, tier into Abyssal Mask, and then if they even have a top lane AP champion, like an AP tank, Galio, Maokai, Nautilus, or even the new AP Kennen, it's just like a lock, because Cassio will never die to anything except the AD carry or the AD jungler. I actually think this item might just be broken in that certain particular composition. And as a top lane choice, it's pretty good as well. Obviously, you want to have some AP damage on your team to get the 10% damage. I'm actually going to call that this item just gets Cassio bans. Or, if you're not banning Cassio, you almost have to pick AD mid and AD top. Or at least, like, AD mid to make her not build this. So, in fact, it's going to be a counter pick, right? Cassio is going to be a counter pick, because if they... First, you want to see that they picked an AP mid. And then you can pick Cassio, and then run the build. And then... Because if they pick Lucian, then you don't need to pick Cassio, right? Then you can pick, I don't know, something else. You can pick Jhin or whatever the hell you want, right? But it just puts Cassio in such a strong position. And I guess some of the AP tank tops in such a strong position. But, I don't know. The top laners have to at least decide between this and Spirit Visage. So, I don't know. That's a lot to say on this item. Adaptive Helm buff, okay. Adaptive Helm is still situational. Pretty much just against Cassio, right? You know, it's kind of funny. If Cassio gets Abyssal Mask, then the enemy top AP tank has to build Adaptive Helm, which just makes... Because... Okay, so let's say you have a AP tank top and they have an AP tank top, right? And they picked an AP mid and you pick Cassio. Then their mid laner might have to go, like, Banshees, Haunting Guys, or whatever, right? And their top laner is going to pick Adaptive Helm. But if you ever get the top lane counter pick where they pick an AP top tank and you guys pick an AD top champion, like Jace or Fiora, then they have to build armor for a lane. And then you just, at the one item spike, you just kill them because they don't have Adaptive Helm yet. It's really good. Ancient Coin, Gold Increase, okay. Missing Mana Increase, okay. Gold Coin Increase, okay. So all these are buffs, and I think Ancient Coin is horrible item because you're giving up the level 1. So, needs help. Zeus Converge, Icon Verge, okay. Jungle items, base mana regen for all, okay, up. With more mana on all junglers, Major Champion doesn't need to provide quite so much on its own, okay, fine with me. Who really struggles with mana in the jungle state, right? None really. Lee Sin, Rek'Sai don't use mana. Elise Nidalee, I guess, use mana. But it's down 3% here and up. I mean, they built this item so they didn't have problems really. So I guess this helps Olaf, right? Because Olaf uses a lot of mana. And with the... We talk about Olaf a lot, but I think it just helps Olaf quite a bit. And so this, I mean, it doesn't really change the state for Elise and Nidalee too much, except in the early game where they're using the mana before they have Runic Echoes. But now that the mana is being put on the first tier or the second tier jungle item, it's pretty strong because most competitive junglers rush Tracker's Knife, so Olaf has a lot of impact there. Maybe Kha'Zix as well. So if Olaf has increased play, then that means Trundle has increased play. That also means that tank junglers are better if both Trundle and Olaf go into the jungle. And if tanks are better, then that means you don't have to pick as many tanks top lane and in the support role because you have a tank in the jungle. One sec. Hello, I'm busy. Hello. I'm good. I know, I'm busy. Bye. Sorry. So anyway, that seems like it's so if there are more tanks in the jungle, then that means that you don't have to pick as many tanks top, which means you can get more Lucian top, you can get more Thresh supports, and that just makes the game more volatile, because if you have Jace top versus Lucian top, then the game could snowball quite quickly, which makes 1 item spikes more important than 2 3 item spikes, which means Essence Reaver gets fucked. It means like mid lane 1 item spikes are stronger, so people who are going the Source Haunting guys route are going to be stronger. The Morello builders are going to be stronger, and people going Banshee's Rush are going to be relatively weaker because they don't have enough damage yet. The top lane 1 item spikes are going to be more important, because if you just build 1 type of resist and they have 2 types of damage, then you're going to be fucked, which means that tanks are going to be worse. I don't know. I think this has a lot of implications on how this game could go. It's a volatile change, honestly. Bami Cinder down, Ruby Crystal, so it's 900 gold, bonus damage to non-champions. So you kill monsters quicker. Not really that important. You didn't, like if you're playing a tank, then you don't really care about how much jungle camps you get in general. 80 health is a lot. For 200 gold though, like if you think about Ruby Crystal, it gives 400 gold, right? No, it gives 150. So if you're paying like 400 gold for 150 health, and now you're losing 80, which is like half for 200 health, I guess it's like the equivalent value. So I guess it's okay, because you're trading off 200 gold for 80 health, which is almost like half of 150 that you have gotten anyway, which kind of means that you can increase your build path a little quicker by getting the next health crystal. So I guess it's okay. It's not great. I don't think it matters too much, honestly, because if you're playing Olaf or Gragas in the jungle, I forgot to mention Gragas a lot, then I don't know, you're in a situation where you can aggregate the state of your build, which I guess is okay and pretty important to get to your second item. Cinderhulk, health down 75, down 200 gold. Bonus health multiplier is 20%, so this is really good for mid and late game, because now you can just spend the 75 to get, you can spend this 200 gold that you're losing to get your next item. So yeah, this is pretty much a buff to the Cinderhulk junglers, which means that Gragas, Olaf, stronger, and all the implications I talked about before. Sunfire Cape, pretty much a top lane item exclusive. Bami Chain Vest, down 200 gold. Okay. So yeah, if you're going to build Sunfire Cape in the top lane, that means you're versus an 80 champion, which basically means you're a tank versus an 80 champion, so you're going to lose regardless of what you build. You're like, I don't know, you're like Nautilus versus Jace or Nautilus versus Fiora, so it really doesn't matter what you build. You just need to build 1 armor item anyway. Sunfire Cape doesn't really matter that much. Health should be more immediately rewarding, so that's now 100 gold. That's cool. It's effectively a camp now. Loading screen tips, random champion. Okay. And bug fixes. Alright, so, and SKT skins. So we spent an hour and 8 minutes talking about 7.13. So there's a lot of impact there, but we're still going to talk about KAYN. So when we talk about KAYN, a peerless practitioner of lethal shadows, Shielded KAYN battles to achieve his true destiny to one day lead the Order of the Shadow into a new era of Ionian supremacy. He audaciously wields the sentient darkened weapon Rust. Undeterred by its creeping corruption of his body and mind, there are only 2 possible outcomes. Either KAYN bends the weapon to his will, or the malevolent scythe consumes him completely, paving the way for destruction. Okay. So when we look at the passive, KAYN wields an ancient weapon and fights the darkened within. It Rast for control. During each game, one will consume the other. KAYN hones his shadow skills by hunting ranged opponents, while Rast fuels the bloodlust by going toe-to-toe with the melee enemies. This is interesting. So KAYN benefits from killing ranged opponents, while Rast benefits from killing melee champions. If KAYN wins a struggle, he ascends to become the Shadow Assassin. So Shadow Assassin is the one that kills the ranged champions. If Rast is the victor, the Darken consumes his host and takes center stage. So Shadow Assassin deals bonus magic damage during the first few seconds of combat with champions. Darken heals for a chunk of all spell damage dealt to champions. So spell damage, that's interesting. So if you're a Shadow Assassin, so if KAYN wins, then that means you killed. I think it means you killed. We don't know exactly what it means, like when it says conquer an enemy. So let's just look at this first. So he kills a ranged champion, so that means he becomes a Shadow Assassin. So it looks like he takes a soul or whatever. Is that level 18? Because if it's at level 18 that you change, then that's pretty bad, right? So it really depends on when you change. Can you change after you get 1 kill? Can you change after you get like 3 kills, 5 kills, level 18, level 11? Like what is it, right? We don't know. But he becomes... So he takes over control, he becomes a Shadow Assassin. Now he deals bonus magic damage for the first few seconds within combat. Okay. And if he kills a melee champion, he becomes Darken. Heals for a chunk of all spell damage dealt to champions. Like we don't really know how to evaluate this, right? Because we don't know his spells cooldowns, so we don't know how good Darken is. We don't know the numerics, so we don't know how much bonus damage it'll be. And it looks like KAYN is a melee champion. So right off the bat, when I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, so KAYN's a melee champion, right? So he's going to innately lose to ranged champions. That's the first thing. So you shouldn't put this in an AD carry role, and it's unlikely to be in a mid role, right? So you're probably going to be in the jungle or the top role, and it doesn't look like a support champion. Not really. It looks like someone that's killing people, right? But we don't know, right? But you don't really want to put him in a range role against ranged mid champions and ranged AD champions. So it's most likely top jungle or support. Now, when he talks about killing a ranged champion, so let's say you put him in the top lane and you're up against a ranged champion, right? You're probably going to lose. So you don't really want to pick him into that situation, right? You probably don't want to, and I'm just saying without knowing anything about numbers or anything, KAYN probably doesn't want to go up against Jace. Right? So most likely you'll pick KAYN as a counter matchup against melee tops, depending on how strong he is. Maybe he's as strong as you are, maybe not, right? Unlikely, but who knows? Or you're going to pick him in the jungle role, which means that he could become either one of these, because depending on what the enemy team has, or you could pick him in the support role. We don't know how much he heals, and we don't know what his spell cooldowns are, so we don't know how strong Darken is. Bonus magic damage when in combat for a few champions. So we don't really know too much yet, but let's look at his Q. KAYN dashes forward, striking nearby enemies at the end of his dash. Both the dash and strike itself deal physical damage. So he's a physical damage dealer. Reaping Slash deals bonus damage to monsters. Okay, so looks like they're setting it up to be a jungler, right? Reaping Slash deals bonus damage to monsters, and obviously minions are not monsters, so putting it highly in the jungle role right now, right? And then Darken, so it looks like Darken gets a special Q. This ability deals bonus % health damage to all enemies except minions. So % health is very tricky, because when you have a stat that does percentage health, that just means you don't have to build that much damage, right? Because you're already going to be doing percentage health damage. So you could be like a semi-bruiser tank in the jungle, or maybe just like a full tank in the jungle, we don't know. But the fact that Darken is the one that gets this gives higher value to you picking Darken or killing melee champions. So that means if you kill melee champions, you're going to heal for a chunk of all spells. So that means like he's more of a sustained fighter, right? You want to kill a melee champion to get extra value from Q, because you don't get extra value from Q if you go Shadow Assassin, killing a ranged champion. So if you kill a melee champion, that means Darken has higher value, which means you're going to do percentage health, which means you're going to be a semi-tank bruiser that does percentage health damage, which means you're going to heal with your passive. And healing with your passive makes you a sustained bruiser type of player, right? Additionally, that probably means you want to gank top lane more than you want to gank bot lane, right? Because bot lane has a ranged champion and typically a ranged support, but could be a melee support. Whereas the top side of the map has a higher percentage chance of having melee champions to become Darken. So this kind of impacts the jungle routing, which I don't like. It's kind of like Kindred, because if you know that Darken is better than Shadow Assassin, then you're going to route towards the areas that give you Darken more. So let's see how it looks. So short range, So forward swipe into circle. Okay. And then this looks like the Darken ability. Forward swipe into circle, doing a percentage amount of damage. Okay. So, looks like a lot of base damage, but we don't know what items he had in this or whatever. So seems very strong. Let's go into W. Blade's Reach. Deals enemy damage in a line that significantly slows all enemies hit. So this is a CC ability, right? Shadow Assassin. Leaves behind a living shadow that casts Blade Reach in KAYN's stead. The living shadow of blades has increased range. Okay. Darken. Blade's Reach briefly knocks up struck enemies. So Shadow Assassin seems to be more damage oriented, right? Because if you're leaving a shadow that casts it, sort of like a Z shadow, I guess that means you can move after it, right? And it also increases the range. So this Shadow Assassin basically gives it a longer range slow, and a little more maneuverability on your part, but Darken probably has a better ability because it briefly knocks up enemies. It's actually hard CC. So without looking at numbers or anything, it seems like Darken has the edge here again, because you would rather have a knock-up than a longer range slow in a high percentage of situations. CC is probably better. So this also probably gives incentive to go bottom up, top lane ganks up against melee champions or killing melee supports. That being said, there's usually going to be more Shadow Assassins because mid lane is usually range, 80 carry is usually range, and then support is range 50-50, probably like 70-30. Range supports like Elise, Nidalee, Graves, and top lane can be range like Jace. So you're probably going to end up having more Shadow Assassins than you are Darkens, but Darken is probably stronger, so let's see it. So this is the neutral W. Okay, so it charges up. It's kind of... It takes like a second, and then it whips him and it slows him. Okay? And it does quite a bit of damage. You saw how low those minions were. But they're level 18, so who knows. So this is the Shadow Assassin. So he can walk away while casting it, and it's a little bit longer. Almost like this much longer. So what does this mean? You can cast it and then keep moving. I mean, it probably doesn't mean too much, right? Like, where are you going to move to? Are you going to move towards them and chase them? Okay, so I guess you can get a little bit closer to them. Hence the assassin type of play. Or you can use it and then walk away. But that means you're already in a bad position. So most of the time you want to cast it and then chase them, right? We don't know if the living shadow does anything or anything. And then Darken. So they have to stand still. It's kind of like a faster Scion Q, right? And then it'll knock them up. This seems to have done less damage. That's kind of interesting. So usually you don't like spells that keep you in one location for too long. So when you do take Darken, if you do decide to take Darken, you're going to be immobile for a little bit. Whereas if you take Shadow Assassin, you're going to probably move, and in all likelihood you're going to move towards them and not away from them. So Shadow Assassin seems like you want a lot of kills, right? Which kind of makes sense because you're killing a ranged champion if you got Shadow Assassin. So you're kind of playing the champion as an assassin, so maybe you have like some kill implications, or maybe like you're a damage champion. But if you go Darken, that means you kill the melee champion. That probably means you kill the supportive tank or supportive top laner, or Olaf or a Lee Sin. That's sort of a supportive jungler. And so I guess that means if you take Darken, you get this heal to stay in the fight a little longer. You get this CC from the W, and you get the percentage health from Q. So Darken seems like it's a tankier style, while Shadow Assassin seems like it's a more kill-oriented style, doing the bonus damage, you know, chasing after them while using your W. So I think I kind of see how this champion's developing. East Shadow Step. KAYN gains a burst of movement speed and the ability to walk through walls for a few moments. I'm just gonna say that again. Gains the ability to walk through walls for moments. Right, games. Okay. When he first enters a wall, he'll heal for a small amount, and the duration of Shadow Step will be greatly extended. We don't know what greatly extended means. Like maybe it's 1 second, maybe it's 2 seconds, maybe it's 5 or 10 seconds, who knows. KAYN won't be able to get the duration extension if he's in combat with enemy champions. Okay, so this means that it's not really a great tool to run away, but it's more of a tool to like go in and try to kill the enemy champion, right? Because maybe you're like in the wall, being stealthy, and then you come out with your extension of time, and then go and kill people, right? And then Shadow Assassin gets the benefit here, while Q Darken got the benefit from your Q. Gains additional movement speed and immunity to slows when activating Shadow Step. So regardless if you're using this early or late, if you're using this to run away or go towards them, you're going to gain move speed. So if you're running away, you're going to get away more often. And if you're chasing them, you're going to probably fight them more often. And we established that Shadow Assassin is going to be the one that's going to be killing backline range targets most of the time. While Darkin is going to be the tankier, bruiser-oriented style, right? So I guess you could depend on game to see what style you play. Like, you don't always want to be Shadow Assassin, and you don't always want to be Darkin, I bet. So let's see how it looks. Does anyone else think this is dumb? Okay. Alright. So wait, looks like he doesn't have a mana bar. So it looks like a manaless champion. I want to say a couple of implications about it being manaless champion, right? One, it means that you can give up blues. Two, it means you can spell spam. And when you spell spam, you're probably going to want to use your Q on cooldown, right? For jungle camp and fighting. And you probably want to use your W for cooldown, right? Jungle camps and fighting. So probably means he has a relatively fast clear, given that his W and Q are both AoE abilities. So in the jungle, because it does extra damage to monsters, the Q is going to clear relatively quickly. And I guess if you're fighting, let's say you have low cooldowns, Shadow Assassin is going to kill people fast in spell rotations, depending on the spell cooldown. And you're going to be healing a lot and getting multiple CC rotations from Darkin. Burst of, like, this is your utility spell. So let's say you do go Shadow Assassin, right? You're kind of stalking the enemy prey, trying to kill them now. Seems like it's what it's supposed to be. And if you're doing Darkin, this seems like your engage tool. E into Q for the engage into WCC, right? Into a sustained tank, percentage health, or something like that. Okay. And it seems relatively long. 2, 3, he's still in at 4, 5. So it looks like 5, 6, 7 seconds. So it seems like a really long time to be stalking your prey. We'll go with that. Our Umbral Trespass. KAYN may manifest any nearby enemy champion who he has recently damaged. Okay? Trespassing into a champion makes KAYN untargetable for a few seconds. So that's at least 2 or 3 seconds. Reacting the ability during this period ends the effect early. Okay, so... Alright, so you probably want to use maximum effectiveness, but why would you want to end it early? KAYN then wrenches himself free from his victims by dealing a burst of damage. So, burst of damage seems like a lot of damage, right? Shadow Assassin. Umbral Trespass can be cast from further away and resets the bonus magic damage from the Darkened Scythe after KAYN exits his victim. So the Darkened Scythe is his passive. So he goes in. I bet he goes in, uses his E, finds the like, let's say you chose Shadow Assassin, finds the target, Qs towards them, you know, auto W, and then uses ults, stays untargetable for the full duration of the ultimate, comes out of the ultimate, does the bonus damage, maybe his Q and W or cooldown are back again, so he rotates those, and then procs Darkened Scythe twice for the bonus additional magic damage. So he'll proc Shadow Assassin Darkened Scythe twice. And it becomes larger range. Darken, Umbral Trespass, deals extra damage as a percentage of the victim's maximum health, healing the Darken in process. So yeah, this is in line with what we talked about, right? So if you're dealing the victim's maximum health, you probably want to use it on tankier targets, right? You want to use it on a top lane tank, you want to use it on the jungle Olaf, the jungle Gragas, the support, because they have higher maximum health percentages, right? So that means you're going to be dealing more actual damage with the Darkened Umbral Trespass. So it's the same combo. E and Q, W, auto, proc your passive Darkened Scythe, ults, and then go for combo rotation again. While, except with Darken, you're doing your heal percentage, you're doing your CC, maybe twice depending on the W cooldown. So let's see how it looks. So this looks like the neutral one. Auto, and then you ults. So you disappear, and then there's a scythe above their head, and then it looks like you can exit with like some type of a slash effect. So Shadow Assassin looks like you're gaining extra range. And I think you're just using this to stall time and then do a little bit of damage. And then this is lower range. And then you're doing maximum health percentage. Okay, so it looks like we have established the two playstyles for this champion, right? You're either an assassin killing ranged champions or Darkin killing melee champions. And the melee champions are usually the tankier champions. It'd be really weird if you like got Darkin from killing Zed. Or you got Shadow Assassin. I mean, I don't think you can ever go wrong with getting Shadow Assassin because you're going to kill people. But if, like, let's say they have, like, no tanks on their team and you get Darkin by killing their mid lane Zed, it's kind of low efficiency, right? Because, let's say they pick Jace top Zed mid, AD carry, Thresh support, Lee Sin jungle, right? They don't really have anyone that gets maximum efficiency out of doing percentage health except maybe Lee Sin. So, Shadow Assassin is probably better universally. Darkin's probably better based on tank situation. Playing as KAYN. KAYN is a slippery, insatiable nightmare who uses his victims' bodies as a recreational vehicle. The Shadow Reaper ultimate is horrifying enough, but even scarier if his tendency to emerge suddenly any wall in the rift. The question is, can you see him in the wall? KAYN is the only champion league who can change his class in the middle of a game. If the other team's squishier champions are carrying, he can focus on attacking ranged opponents to become the Shadow Assassin. Yep. If KAYN is to take your front line, Ross is a Darkin for a job. Yep. Seems exactly like what I talked about. I'm a weapon, you're the tool. Okay, tips and tricks. KAYN and Ras are hungry boys. You've got to feed him by ganking lanes. Okay, so it looks like they're establishing him as a jungler and dealing damage to champions. Taking too long to transform you, you'll fall behind in the mid-game. Okay, so it seems like you can transform early. KAYN's two evolves form have their own unique trade-offs. Darkin has Hellgraph crowd control, limited access to the enemy backline. Shadow Assassin is very limited sustained damage and no hard crowd control. Keep their team composition and choose wisely. Umbral Trust has a few interesting interactions with other mobile champions. Send enemy Shen ulting so botlane, get close enough to trespass board. Oh, that's so much funny. Is that like a light counter pick to the top lane? Okay, so I have to preface this as we're establishing that KAYN's probably not going to be a mid laner AD carry. Seems to be a jungler because he does extra damage on monsters, but could be a top laner or a support, right? But it seems like he wants to get a kill. It seems like the way he's established as a champion is to get a kill. So he doesn't seem to be a support champion, right? So it's probably a jungler or a top lane champion. Now, if you play him as a top lane champion, you almost certainly know who you're probably going to get your Darkin Scythe from, right? If you're versus a ranged champion. Okay, so you never really want to pick KAYN into Jace, Kennen, Gnar, right? Because then you're melee against a range. And if you're a melee against a range, you're probably going to lose the lane. So you probably only want to pick Darkin top if you're up against another melee champion, right? So maybe Darkin's a pick into Fiora, maybe, into Trundle, into Galio, Maokai, Nautilus. It's kind of interesting. I wonder what happens if you do it against Gnar in melee form or Jason melee form instead of range form, things like that. But you pretty much only want to pick a top against melee champions, right? If you're picking a top against melee champions, that means you're probably going to get Darkin, right? That means you're probably going to be a bruiser, tank, sustain, type of champion. So you're already locked into your effective role if you pick him in the top lane, because you'll know what lane, what your opposing laner is going to be, and the highest percentage chance of you getting a kill against anybody on the map is going to be your opposing laner, so you're probably going to get Darkin. So if you probably get Darkin, which means you get Rost, then you're probably going to be playing him as a tank or bruiser CC tank. But a bruiser CC Darkin is probably going to be worse than if you had just picked a full tank like Galio or Maokai, right? So he's probably not even going to be in the top lane, which means he's probably exclusively a jungler. Or like a mid lane against Zed. But then you're playing tank against Zed, so you're probably just a worse Galio anyway. Like, you never want to pick him into a ranged champion because he's a melee champion. And you never want him to be against a melee champion because then you're just a worse full tank. I guess you can play him as a bruiser like a Fiora. But the question is he a better pick than Fiora? Because if you're picking like him against Galio, why wouldn't you have just picked Fiora? Unless he's stronger than Fiora, right? So he's probably going to be a jungler a high percentage of the time. Extras. Is that it? Is there no, like... Okay, so we don't know anything else. So my expectation is that he's going to be a jungler almost 95% of the time. Unless he's stronger than Fiora or Trundle. Then he can pick up the top lane role of Assassin. Or, Darkin. So it's been an hour and a half. Really long patch 7.13 and KAYN champion reveal. Thank you guys for watching. If you like, feel free to follow Twitch TV, Lol Chinese Jester, or the social media below. I know this is kind of long, but there was a lot to cover. So thank you guys for watching.